Hello and welcome to Building the Premier Accounting Firm. I'm your host, Roger Knecht, president of Universal Accounting Center, and this is a show dedicated to helping accounting professionals, owners of bookkeeping, accounting, and tax businesses to work on their businesses and build what I refer to as the premier accounting firm. In doing this, we have each and every week experts on the show to help us with the various things that we need to be addressing as we're running our companies. And today's going to be a wonderful guest, someone that I've been excited to speak with. It's Candice Elliott. Candice happens to be a fractional CHRO and HR mentor for agency owners and their teams. She focuses on the intersection of public health and organizational community development, helping leaders foster cultures of healing where they and their teams can thrive. She has a master's in HR from Penn State and a CPHR certificate, and also has been practicing in the HR within the U.S. and internationally for more than 10 years. She's the mom of two young boys, two young boys under the age of 3. So Candice, welcome to the show.
Roger, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
This is going to be a wonderful conversation. Now, one of the things that my listeners enjoy are these off-topic things that we typically have, where rather than talking about the accounting and the marketing, we're talking about now mental health and also our staff. So this is going to be a wonderful conversation. I've got a ton of questions that I'm excited to ask you. So let's first of all start with what got you interested in healthcare and how healthcare and work intertwine.
Yeah, that's a great place to start. So I had something happen to me at work, actually, where um, I was doing what I think a lot of us do, which is just working a lot. I was the human resources manager for a restaurant group that had 150 employees and 5 different locations. And we would go through cycles where things were busier and things were slower. And we were going through a particularly busy time. There was a harassment investigation that was happening. There was turnover in a couple of key positions. And it was like everything all came to a head, and the stress just, I cracked. I had a panic attack and I had trouble breathing. And I realized that the stress and what was happening in my work was actually affecting my body physically and also my mental health at the same time. And I ended up starting my company, Fortress and Flourish, a few months later, and transitioning to assisting smaller business owners and nonprofit leaders with HR practices. Just best practices to start, things, creating consistency in the way that you're treating employees, for example.
Yeah, one of the things that I've experienced is being a larger organization. When you have 50 plus employees, it's common to have an HR department, an HR group of people that are attentive to the needs of the business as it relates to the employees. Us smaller companies, we don't have those types of things. We don't have a dedicated employed individual that is on salary to take care of those things. And so oftentimes management is having to kind of develop these skills and be attentive to these needs as it relates to our staff and taking care of the mental health, if you will, of them as they're, doing their part within the company. So you experienced this personally. You now service small businesses. So let's talk about what's happening in the world. After the pandemic, we've got this whole situation where people are more inclined to be working remotely out of the office. They're alone. They don't have that human interaction that perhaps once existed in the office space. How's the loneliness epidemic coming into business at this point?
Yeah, I think just in the ways that you mentioned, definitely. And also, I think business owners have this challenge in addressing HR issues or employee issues when they come up. It's not necessarily something that you go into wanting to own a business and dealing with employee things that happen, but it becomes something that becomes important as you have more and more people on your team, and as people work for you for a longer period of time, things start to happen. You might have an employee who becomes pregnant, or their partner does, and so you're doing some kind of a medical leave of absence, or you might have a situation where someone feels uncomfortable about the way someone approached them in the workplace. And that could be another employee, or it could be a client, and you might find yourself needing to do some kind of an investigation into something that happened to figure out what it is. And these are the kinds of things that I partner with business owners to do, to help them with the things that are a little bit out of their depth. For example, maybe you have an employee who just isn't working out and you've tried everything that you possibly can do to bring them, back into the fold, but it just isn't working and you need to do your first termination. But to go back to loneliness and the loneliness epidemic, the way that our society is structured now is quite different from the way that it was, even 50 years ago. When I think about my grandma and when she was first in the workplace, she was going to an office in a construction company. She was greeting people who were coming in the door. And there still are, places of work that are like that. But a lot of us are working in this virtual sort of space. Right now I'm in a room by myself, recording this with you, and you're in a room by yourself in another place. And the connection that we have through technology is wonderful because it allows us to be able to reach further than we have been able to in the past. But it also can be limiting because the interaction between two people who are physically in the same space is just of a different quality than the interaction of two people who are far apart and connecting through technology.
Yeah, you're addressing some wonderful things here. So let me just kind of dive into a few of these elements. First of all, with loneliness, one of the things that I've learned, and I've very much become a proponent of it, is with all the remote working that's going on, there is a company responsibility as it relates to culture as to how we interact with our employees, asking that they turn on their cameras, that we see one another, that they actually, pay attention during the meetings, not try and multitask. So there's a variety of things that we try to do remotely within the culture to try and enable us to work well together. But to the point that we are social creatures and we need human interactions, even the most antisocial person honestly should be having social interactions at some level. And for that reason, I say that the individual employee needs to take it upon themselves to make sure that they're actually meeting those needs. And here's what I mean by that. There's a lot of people that because of being, in the home, working as they may be, they've got to get outside. You've got to get sunlight. You've got to go for a walk. You've got to get out there and actually kind of enjoy nature for what it is. And that's just walking around the block, going to a park. You've got to get out of the house. And where you've got Prime and even some places that deliver groceries, and it's wonderful to have technology where it all comes to your door, but you've got to get out of the house. The second thing that I would also point out is with regards to human interactions, if you're not having those as we used to around the water cooler and you're meeting with people face to face, you need to have friends or family that you're meeting with and socializing with in person. We cannot be people that live in a cave and assume that we're doing ourselves mental health and social healthy things. We've got to be out there meeting with people. What would you say to that?
Well, it just brings up for me a couple of changes that I made personally and my family made this year. So there's a podcast that's called 1,000 Hours Outside. And the idea is that you spend 1,000 hours outside with your family or, with yourself. The goal of that being that instead of spending those hours inside or on a screen, that you're actually being out in nature. And nature has a therapeutic effect. It doesn't have to be, going out into a forest. It can just be being outside and seeing some trees or going for a walk in some grass. I happen to live in a really beautiful area in Santa Cruz, California. So we have ocean and mountains and like all the different things. And we're so lucky. So that's one of our goals. We have this poster that's printed up in our living room and we're coloring in all the hours that we're spending outside. And we're up to like 60 right now. And then the other thing of being, the water cooler conversations is I actually started working in a co-working space about a month ago. And it's just amazing the quality of life, being able to be in a physical space with other people who are working. It's not something that I felt like I needed for a while, but now it's been really great, actually.
Yep. I see value in, because the workplace may not offer it because of the remote working environment, I see value in having some type of community that you're interacting with in a personal space, whether it's organized religion or there's some association you're participating in, a neighborhood group. Maybe it's just a group of friends in the neighborhood that you go dog walking with. It's the fact that you're interacting with people that I'm referring to here.
Yeah.
As to your nature thing, there is a comment I'd like to make about that. I know there's a number of people that are proponents of taking off the shoes and having your feet on the ground. There's a lot to be said with there's this need to actually have your feet touching the soil, the grass and such. And there's a lot of therapeutic stuff that comes from grounding yourself to the earth. And I think there's a lot to be said about just getting out and taking in nature in that capacity. So two really good things there. But I'm going to ask another question because of this loneliness. You commented on something that I think is hugely important. Many business owners start their business because they're excited to grow and offer a product or a service. You start taking on employees and you start to experience, in many instances, drama. Drama comes because of the fact that as humans, we just have things going on. And I'm going to be very, very honest here. As the president of a company, as someone running a business, I just need a task done. I'm paying you to get a job done. And I don't want to sound insensitive. I like to think I like people and I like to think I care about people. But when it comes down to business, we're on the clock and I'm paying you to get a job done. What advice do you have to the business owner as we sometimes come across insensitive to situations when we're just asking the job to get done? Any advice?
Yeah, I think part of what is important is to think about what is sustainable for your employees to be able to do for the long term. So it could be that you're going through a period of time that's just especially busy and it's not going to last very long. And if that's the case, if it's a big push to the end of a project or on some work for a client, it can be just having a conversation with the staff to prepare them that that's headed their way, that it's going to be rough for a month or two, but then we're going to get to the other side of it and things will back off a little bit. It could be that you look at utilization rates. This is where especially if you have people who are billing hours to projects or billing hours to clients, where you look at how many hours of their total time you want them to be using on billable work. So it's impossible for people to be doing billable work 100% of the time because they need to be communicating potentially with you. They need to potentially be in meetings that are not billable meetings. They need to have some time to be able to organize their own thoughts and be able to decompress. And I know that it sounds like all of the decompression that people should be doing should be happening off the clock. But if people are working full time, 8 in the morning until 5 at night, that's the day, right? So there needs to be some time in the middle of the day or throughout the day where people are able to disconnect their brain from their work to be able to reconnect to their work to be able to do it better.
Yeah. I'm going to add a few things here just because I love your advice. Wonderful advice. I especially liked preparing them ahead of time for these hustle times, these moments of intensity where you're able to say, okay, next week we're going to do this and it's going to be this long. And then there's an end in sight that we can kind of look forward to. But what I would add to it is, as an employer, I think we need to be more conscious of the fact that we do have some employees that are workaholics like us, and we need to intentionally go in there and give them permission to take a break. Like you were indicating, we need to encourage them to get out. And what I would add to that is the fact that in some working environments, I've been in some myself, there is a stigma around who's working more. And you're drawing attention to the people that are getting up more and socializing a little bit, or maybe taking time off or vacation, and they're being chastised almost like they're not working as hard as the rest of us. But in reality, they're doing the smart thing and actually taking off a day or going on a vacation or something. And the person, and to my point, in this particular work environment, it was a badge of honor at the end of the year how many hours of vacation, PTO time, was being forfeited because we could only carry over so much to the next year. And it was this badge of honor of who was forfeiting or losing the most. How sad is that? We should be celebrating and encouraging people to take the time off to rejuvenate themselves and get grounded. We want to work to live, not live to work. And I think that's something that's very helpful. The second thing that I would add to this is the fact that I do feel that we need to, in that culture, encourage our employees to get out of the office, which is to say people are working at home, get them out of the house. They're working in the office, get them into the office. go to lunch with the team somewhere and get them into another environment where you can be a little bit more social in your interactions. And I think that creates a little bit more healthy dynamic or interaction for the staff. This is wonderful. I'm loving this conversation, by the way. So
Yeah.
let's talk about stress and how it relates to physical and psychological health.
Yeah. So I think going back to what you were just talking about,
Mm-hmm.
I think that fear and shame are very strong, emotions that we
Yeah.
have. And I think that they they come up in work.
Uh-huh.
Um, and that when we're having difficult times at work, it can activate our senses of fear, our senses of shame, our wanting to sort of run away and escape from what's going on is one way that that shows itself. And then another way is the fighting and the being in the middle of it and the trying to do all the work and not take any of the time off, right? And so I think with both of those things on both ends of the spectrum, if you find you have employees who are disappearing, or you find that you have employees who are fighting, maybe they're angry, maybe they're, having conflict with other employees or with clients, that really, to address that, it comes from the leadership from the top of the organization to create space um, around the different kind of emotions and reactions that can come up in the workplace. And I know that's a challenging thing for business owners to deal with, because you're not in the business of dealing with people and their emotions and their, fight or flight responses, usually, but it is a part of having people and employees working together. And also it relates to participating in our greater community. One of the ways that I spend time with people outside of work and outside of my family is in the local politics, and in our nonprofit, arena. I served on a community advisory committee that was related to homelessness. We have one of the highest rates of homelessness in the United States here, and it was through really tough dialogue and conversation and a lot of anger and a lot of like big feelings around how people are being treated in our society and by their neighbors. Um, and it took some work to be able to have productive conversations among all of that. And so when we have hard situations that come up at work, when we're addressing them, it isn't just about, you know, getting the work done and getting beyond it and squashing what's happening for people. It's about being able to bring out the best in people, and being able to really look at what's challenging.
So there's a balance here, and I'm curious what you're going to say about this. Clearly, and I'm going to come at it from being the owner of the business.
Great.
Clearly, you're hired as an employee to get a particular task done. There's a variety of ways to describe it. Just for simplicity, we're going to say a task. You're hired to do something specific. Now, that being the case, that individual has other interests. They probably have a family life. They probably have a social life. You indicated being involved in politics, which is awesome. You've got people that are involved in their religion. And so there's a lot of outside elements of who this person is. They're more than just the employee that I have at the office. But when I have you on the clock at my office, I want the employee. I don't want the family person. I don't want the politician. I don't want the religious person. I want the employee at the office. And I admit that that's the person as a whole is all those other things, but we're here to get something done. And is it being done? Now, where stress comes in and coping and drama is sometimes those outside things want to kind of filter in. You know, somebody from home is calling the mother or father and saying, "Hey, mom or dad, I need your help." Well, clearly I'd want to say, well, hold on, I've paid for this time. You're supposed to be working for me. Why are you talking to your kids? But that's almost too insensitive. But the point is they need to, as employees, also recognize that there's a time and place for all things. And so we're trying to help in the culture create this idea of you've got time to do those things. I'm not asking for 24/7. I'm just asking for, 40, 50 hours a week. And you've got other time to do that. How does, as an employer, how do I deal with this culture that we're trying to foster within the organization, but still let the individual be an individual?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, a little bit of history to bring into the conversation. So, when work was becoming the current form of what work is,
Mm-hmm.
we're coming out of colonization into the industrial era where we had factories. And in Europe, there was a philosophical thought process that came out that is called Enlightenment.
Mm-hmm.
And in Enlightenment, we have this idea of the mechanization of the human body.
Mm-hmm.
And that part of that idea is that we can separate pieces of the body and we can separate parts of the person. So we can separate our work life from our home life. We can separate our anxiety and our, all of our emotions from our logical thought process.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a theory that has really integrated itself into the way that we treat people in work. And it is not necessarily something that is true, but it is something that has become a part of the way that we deal with people at work. And so I'm curious what your thoughts are on that. Like, what do you think about?
Yeah. No, I'm actually familiar with the Enlightenment, and I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
What some people may say is that it leads to the objectification of the human being, because I'm looking at you as an object, I'm looking at you as a work person, then I'm looking at you as a societal person and so forth, because I'm compartmentalizing individuals. I'm going to argue that society has done phenomenally well in the last century into that concept of I'm paying you for this particular skill or ability that you have. Now go do this, and I will pay you in kind for that emphasis. And where I find that society today is starting to deviate from that is with the smartphone. The smartphone, interestingly enough, causes individuals to be distracted from the task at hand. And so they get this constant bombardment of dings and notifications and text messages and so forth that are coming in and disrupting what's going on. Same thing with email. I'm very aware of the fact that individuals will receive personal and professional emails to the same email folder that they're working. And so throughout the day, you're constantly getting dinged or interrupted with your workflow with personal versus professional things. Other people outside of you are impacting or affecting your prioritization of what you're working on because they have their priorities that they're bringing to the forefront. So my point in answering your question is, yes, it isn't as clean as the Enlightenment might want to project that we are compartmentalized as individuals. However, that's the challenge we face as people. Our abilities to prioritize, our abilities to segment and focus. That's, there's a good argument out there that you cannot multitask and get things done as efficiently as when you're focused on something. Well, the smartphone and the email and all those things are, in essence, a multitasking of different things. So what I'm trying to answer as your question is the Enlightenment idea of we can actually become very good in certain segments of our lives, and as individuals develop those skills, interpersonal skills, relationship skills, work skills. I think that's valuable because then we become much more relevant to our employer. We become more valuable to our society. We become more valuable to the relationships that we have, our roles as spouses and fathers and so forth. They become much better because we've individually enhanced or improved our skills as it relates to those areas of our lives. How am I doing in answering your question?
That's great. Yeah. It's just bringing up for me a book that I read recently that's called Stolen Focus.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you've read
Not
it,
read
but
that one, no.
yeah, it's great. It talks especially about the interruptions of technology into our lives, and especially the ways that technology has been designed to do that. Like email is designed to keep us in email and doing emails, and our phones are designed to keep us on our phones and doing different things on our phones. Yesterday, I picked up my phone to send a picture of my son to my mom, and I ended up in some kind of vortex of different apps on the thing because something pinged me, and then I got all distracted, and then a half an hour later I forgot why I even picked up the thing in the first place.
Been there, done that. We'll attribute it to old age, but clearly these things are taking advantage of it.
Oh yeah. I mean, they're definitely designed to do that because the part of the way that they're developed is to take more time, and that they're more successful if we're spending more time on
That's
them
right.
because we're being advertised to as we're doing these things. So yeah, I think that the challenge of this digital age of being able to focus when we need to focus is really tough, and being a mom, there's an app on my phone that's for my kids' preschool, and it pops up when something is happening there, and that doesn't actually help me get my work done, right?
Well, I'm going to answer that. I think my generation, I'm older, and so it's less of an issue for me. I am fine setting down my phone and not picking up my phone. I do have the phantom shakes in my leg because of my pocket, where I'll sense that the phone's going off and my phone's not even in my pocket. So it's kind of interesting what's going on here. But the younger generation, as I've seen it, they're definitely drawn by all these little pings and notifications. And it's almost like this squirrel environment. Squirrel, squirrel, squirrel. They're just being drawn in so many directions that at the end of the day, it's like, what did you want to do? And I wanted to do this, and I haven't even done it, but I've done everything else for the last half hour or an hour. And it's the scrolling on the Instagram where you're going from reel to reel and TikTok and so forth, and an hour disappears and you don't even know what you've done with it. This is sad, and it's very telling. I want to say it was Denzel Washington, but I'm not 100% it was Denzel Washington, but he spoke of how reliant we're becoming on these tools and devices, and how we need to separate ourselves from them because they're simply tools. And what they're doing is they're really running our lives, when in reality they should be a tool to accomplish a specific task. And if we're turning our lives over to these various things, shame on us. And so I think that's something that just talks to our own ability as individuals to have control, just self-control.
Yeah, I'm in this interesting generation that's, I'm a millennial. And I don't know. One time I was visiting, my family has a cabin in the Sierra Nevada mountains, and I've been going there since I was a baby. And it didn't have cell phone reception for the longest time. And when I was little, that would, annoy me. But I was up there and I dropped my phone into the lake by accident one night. I was using an app to find out what the stars were in the sky that we were looking at, what the planets were. And I dropped it into the lake, and it like flickered and then died. And I was still going to be up there for another 5 days or so. And it was amazing how much it changed the way that I lived to just not have the thing. And I wasn't going to have one delivered. I was going to drive all the way back to my house on, 5 hours away, just by memory, knowing the roads and not putting it into the GPS. And it reminded me also, that, wayfinding and pathfinding. We used to have conversations about these things. Like my grandma would be, asking questions about which way are you going to go? And, it's better to turn down this road and that road. And so there's just conversations that we don't even have anymore because we use these devices to help us to do things.
Yeah. And I'm going to bring this kind of full circle here. So like you, I have a cabin. My father's built it. I built it with him as a child in the 80s, and has a cabin like you. It's remote. No electricity, no running water. It's basically, for a guy, it's a shack in the woods, and I love it. And it's someplace I can go and decompress. It is a sanctuary for me.
Yeah.
But like you, for the longest time, cell phones didn't work there, and it was a hole. And I would go up there, I'd just turn off my phone, and for a period of time, not have any phone on me. Well, only about a year or so ago, they put a tower nearby. So now there's a tower giving us reception. And it used to only be AT&T. Now it's all the carriers. And I bring this up because for the longest time, nobody had service. Now I still go up and turn off my phone and don't use it. But many of the people come up and they now leave their phones on. And at night when they go to bed, they'll watch a Netflix movie, whatever. And it's fascinating to me to see how their interactions up at the cabin are different than mine, because I can do all those things at home. I don't want to do them at the cabin. I want to do something else. So how does this full circle go back? It's this. I'm intrigued by how, as employees, as people, we can sit at a table across from one another and stare at our phones. And it causes individuals to struggle to have human interactions, conversations, dialogue about various things. And it's when you're in those awkward moments, whether at work or at lunch, where you're having a conversation about presumably nothing, but then it might evolve into, hey, I've got a question. Do you know anything about this? And it can actually turn into something quite important. But notice it wasn't an intentional conversation. You didn't meet with that intent of, we're going to discuss this. It evolved into that. But because we get drawn into our phones, we get sucked away from those interpersonal personal interactions, and that's sad. It's hugely sad. So, no, this is great. Do you have any thoughts on that before we go on?
Yeah, to tie it back to mental health and the workplace, um, when we're looking at a phone, that process of and even a computer screen, that process of looking at something very intently that's right in front of our face is, I read somewhere that is a part of a predator process, so it brings us into an agitated state to be focusing on something small that's right in front of our face. And so it tends to increase our stress levels. And if we're in a state that is more stressed, we're not thinking as creatively. We're not creating new pathways in our brains. We're just, recycling the ones that are well
Yeah.
trodden. And so if we're going to be thinking about the complex problems that we face today and creating creative solutions around them, if we are going to be looking at what's happening in our businesses and thinking about how to address those in creative ways, we need to be able to get ourselves into a more like relaxed sort of state in our bodies, to have the capacity for that, to have the capacity for those kinds of free conversations.
That is beautiful. I absolutely love that. That was a good little tie into this whole thing. And I really think that we can get stuck in ruts, is how I would say it. And we need to be more creative and step outside of the norm, because clearly what we're doing now isn't working. So we got to figure out something new to do. So very much agree with all of that. All right. So I have two more questions that I wanted to kind of dive into before we wrapped all this up. The first of which is, what can we do as employers to better help our employees as it relates to emotional health? Some of them struggle. There's a lot of depression, anxiety, fear, as you were talking. What can we do as we're watching our employees and maybe look for signs that show that they may have inappropriate stresses or inappropriate anxieties? I want you to hustle. I want there to be a sense of urgency and anxiousness to get the job done. We've got deadlines and so forth. But I don't need it to be causing you health issues. I don't need it to be causing you panic attacks. I mean, I need you to hustle, but I don't need you to be in a state of fear. So what are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, there's a study that was done by the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and Hiring Our Heroes, an organization that works with veterans, where they found that 80% of Americans are going to have some kind of mental health crisis during their work lives. And I would argue probably more than that, Will, and it could be something that happens at work, or it could be something that happens in their personal lives that affects work.
Mm-hmm.
But when we talk about the whole person, part of dealing with these situations when they come up is noticing when people are becoming agitated, when they're becoming angry, when they're when they have a fight going on in them, noticing when people are kind of disappearing, when they're wanting to like get away and not engage. And of course, work is work. It's important for us to be productive in our work, but we can do that in a way that is really engaged, and where we really feel fulfilled by the work that we're doing, or we can do it in a way where we're really overriding our sensibilities and our abilities at the time. I think it's important to understand that people have capacity and they have different capacities at different times, right? When I was right after I had my son, my capacity to be able to work was very small. I could maybe answer an email every few days that came through. Now that he's 6 months old, my capacity is different, but it's still not to the ability where I'm able to, work 80 hours a week if I need to. So, that's one kind of life change that people go through in the workplace. But so just having a sense of, maybe this person isn't at their full capacity right now. Maybe they need some help to back off a little bit so that they can recuperate and be able to get back to their full capacity again.
Good. Thank you for that. Next question. The idea of being persons, individuals in a work environment, and I'm talking about more the office space because you're going to clearly see my question. This is irrelevant to remote
Okay.
workers. There's a lot to be said for people that try to help individuals be that person, be their individual selves at the office, but not have it bleed over to affecting other people. And here's my point. I've been in environments where people have had uh, pets that have come to the office. Well, clearly you could have individuals that have pet allergies. And so having the animals there at the office might be impacting a fellow coworker. You can have individuals that like listening to music, but obviously not everyone's interested in the music. You've got people that like incense or something to that effect, candles and so forth. And that scent doesn't appeal to everyone in the office. What are some of the things that allow us to maybe be ourselves, but maybe don't kind of bleed over or impact other individuals positively or negatively? It's something that lets us be ourselves, but doesn't affect everyone else.
Yeah, that's a good question. It's so unique in the different, environments where it
Hmm.
happens. I think that in, HR, quote unquote, the answer is usually to make some kind of a rule that is applied consistently across all of the
Yep.
employees. So if
Yep.
there's a candle that a person doesn't like, then nobody can have candles anymore.
Yep.
And y that might be what you need to do in order for it to be fair when there are a lot of people around, a lot of employees, maybe not. And if you have a smaller organization, maybe you're, 3 to 4 people, um, it it you could just have conversations around it, you know? I think that gets to this community aspect of, work is a place where we are full humans and we bring all of our full humanity into our work. And sometimes, even when you have a smaller team, there are more of those interpersonal things that come up. And being able to have a dialogue with your coworker or as the business owner to be able to facilitate a dialogue if people are not getting along is really a key skill to develop.
Interesting. Good. I appreciate that answer. All right. The next question is, with the stresses and anxieties, there are people that get to the point where they are not coping well. Whether we're the owner, whether it's our staff, there are instances where coping is just not working and the mental health of the individual is strained. And I'm talking to the point of not just depression, but perhaps suicide ideation. So my question to you is how can we might be able to pay attention to that mental health issue? How does it manifest itself that we might be self-aware and conscious of it as it affects others? And what advice do you have to help individuals that might be experiencing that?
Yeah. Um, I think that as a business owner, it's good to know what free mental health resources are available in your community. I know that where I live, there are a lot of different resources that are out there that people can be referred to. Um, I think that to start to talk about your own ways of supporting your mental health is important. So kind of showing what you're doing, telling people if you're going to be out taking a walk in the afternoon or, even if you're comfortable, if you do see a therapist, for example, telling your team that that's something that you're doing to help to destigmatize that work that you're working on. It's really important work to be doing. Um, and uh, it, it's something that you can do as a business owner is to have some kind of a benefit for your employees that supports this kind of work. So if you're offering a medical insurance plan, for example, offering a plan that will cover mental health care is an important thing to do. Um, Looking into support for your team either through a coach or a mentor for everyone on the team or for yourself to be able to help people through these situations that happen and it you, recognizing that you're not a mental health professional and I'm not a mental health professional either, so where that line is of where you're useful and where it's good to refer someone to someone else who really knows these things and can be able to work through it well.
I like this. I really appreciate your two comments there. One regarding the stigma regarding therapy. I do feel as a society we need to do a little bit better job, not even a little bit, a better job of trying to help people understand that it's actually healthy to receive that type of support. Going to a therapist is wonderful. I believe that we need to see it as someone is seeing that they're investing in themselves to make things better. It's not to say things are wrong or broken. It's just to say that I'm where I'm at and I'd like it to be better. And that mindset, I think, just encourages people to invest in themselves, time and money, to improve their ability to cope with situations and run their lives better and be better individuals, better human beings. And I think that's something that we need to take away as being a bad thing, but make it be a good thing. You're investing in yourself. Congratulations. That's awesome. The second thing that I'd like to point out is the idea of offering that in the sense of I need to listen to my employees, but I need to know when they need somebody professional. We need to be good at listening. We need to be good at talking to people, and we need to care. We need to be take an interest in our employees to the sense of knowing what matters to them. Earlier, I said we are here to work, but at the same time, it's not that I'm not seeing you as an individual. I want to know, do you have a family? What are you doing with your family? What do you have as extracurricular hobbies? What do you do? What interests you? But in knowing that, I want to be able to say that as things start to come in from the outside and affecting your work, I need to be able to say, I'm here to listen, what's going on? And as it gets to a point that possibly they need somebody professional to suggest they do that and point them in that direction, because we aren't necessarily those be all end all people. I've been a marriage therapist in the sense that I've had those conversations, but I'm not a professional marriage therapist. I've been, as a therapist in the sense that I've dealt with people that have been dealing with stress, anxiety, depression. Well, I can go only so far because I can meet them where I'm coming from as a human being, but I'm not a professional therapist. And so I can only take it so far. So I appreciate you pointing out we need to know when it's right to say, go talk to someone professional. So this has been a wonderful conversation. I was very excited about having it. I know it's something that my listeners will appreciate. So I thank you for it. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do a summary of our conversation, and then at the same time, Candice, come back to you for a closing thought. But before I go into my summary, I do want to point out something here that you all, as listeners, need to take advantage of. Candice is providing in the episode description 5 ways to support your mental health. It's a free download for business owners and their teams, something that you can take advantage of by going to the episode description and finding there that resource. And I would encourage you to take advantage of it. At the same time, I want to also mention that we have, as a podcast, playlist, basically a collection of mental health discussions that we've had with previous experts that you can actually find by going to universalaccounting.com. And in the site navigation, go to the podcast section, and there you'll find basically highlights. In the highlights, we've prepared playlists, one of which is for mental health. And we've had other individuals that have come on and shared some phenomenal information regarding this as it relates to business and you personally. So I encourage you as a listener to take advantage of those different conversations that we've had and really kind of go deep into this. I think this is an excellent topic, and I'm glad that we've had Candice on the show today. As it relates to the episode, this was wonderful. I appreciate Candice's background, her 10 years plus experience in the mental health industry. She was able to bring some wonderful insights. I like that we were able to talk about the Enlightenment era and how it's impacted us as a culture, seeing individuals as parts and whole. And I think that's something that we need to see and understand, that we're getting the whole individual, even though we're trying to pay them for a specific part of what their skills or expertise is. And with that, we can be sensitive as business owners to be very clear as to what we're expecting, but at the same time, recognizing them as human beings, which they are. The other thing that I really appreciated is her insights as it relates to stress and handling those things, the various things that we can be doing, such as getting outside. She was talking about her 1,000 hours outdoors in nature. I love that. I love the nature. And, her time at the cabin, that was a good example of checking out and kind of reassessing and kind of grounding yourself, kind of talking self-talk, I think is a way to look at it. So wonderful conversation today. Excellent topics. So Candice, what closing thought would you have for the group?
I think what's coming up is just that this isn't an either or thing. It's not like you can be productive or you can have good mental health. It's actually a cycle. And through having productivity that's well aligned for you and also having good mental health, it just feeds on each other and it becomes better. And then you're better able to be live out your meaning in life through your work.
Love that. Wonderful. Excellent way to end the show today. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to invite everyone listening, if you haven't already, definitely subscribe to the podcast. It's something that comes out each and every week with the experts. I want to encourage you to now subscribe and set your notifications to be notified of when this next episode will be. As for the show, definitely leave us some feedback. Love your comments and so forth. We see those coming in. We appreciate them. As it relates to the podcast, we also have at Universal Accounting School, universalaccounting.com, that podcast section that I encourage you to check out. Regarding GrowCon, let me just put in a mention of GrowCon real quickly. It is an annual event for owners of bookkeeping, accounting, and tax businesses. This is a conference you do not want to miss. It's where you're able to come and work on your business, and in doing so, hear from the experts, interact with your peers, and also meet the staff here at Universal Accounting Center. Definitely make time to schedule your trip, and at the same time join us for that. It's a 2-day conference that you do not want to miss, and you can go to universalaccounting.com and find more information about dates, times, locations there for GrowCon. The other thing I want to point out is regarding the free resources on universalaccounting.com. Universal Accounting has a number of free resources intent to actually help you as the owner of a bookkeeping, accounting, tax business run your business intently. Basically, you've got free ebooks, courses, white papers, and the like, things related to marketing your business, selling your services, offering quality services, all these things that you need to be aware of as you're running your company. So take advantage of those free resources. And then lastly, as it relates to this podcast, if you have any information that you'd like to discuss, things that you'd like to actually apply in your business, feel free to reach out to us. You can do so by going to universalaccountingschool.com or giving us a phone call at 801-265-3777. And always remember this, if it's about accounting, it is universal. Take care, be safe out there, and have a great day.